from Wellness TV. Today what we're going to talk about is movement quality. What is it and how can we analyse it? Hope you guys enjoyed the presentation.
Alright guys, welcome to our presentation today. So again, if we look at the athletic development hierarchy, we can see that movement quality is also at the foundation of the hierarchy. So what is it? Basically it's how well our body moves. How functional or dysfunctional our mobility and motor control are with regards to our body's ability to create movement. So what we want to know is, do we have a baseline level of movement quality or competency to be able to buffer the stressors of a strength and conditioning program? How do we measure it? Well, for me personally, I use the functional movement screen. Now before I go on, do I believe everyone has to use the functional movement screen as the only tool in assessing movement quality? No, not at all. But I absolutely do believe that you should be measuring movement quality with some sort of measurable system. As Charlie Weingroth said in the Strength and Motion DVDs that he did with Patrick Ward and Joel Jansen, a system that looks at a baseline minimum of movement competency should be body weight, minimally cued and modifiable. What I'm going to go through here now is some criticism about the functional movement screen. A lot of critics of the functional movement screen make arguments against it with very false assumptions. Examples will be, it's not sport specific. This is 100% correct. It's not meant to be sport specific. The functional movement screen is based off neurodevelopmental kinesiology principles. It is species specific, so if you are human, it is specific. Another argument, it says that we all need to be perfectly symmetrical. No, it doesn't. The FMS has never said this. The FMS just doesn't want gross asymmetry. The FMS allows for proportional asymmetry. An example here is symmetrical twos, which has a lot of grey area. So examples of proportional symmetry within the functional movement screen will be the hurdle step, for example. You could get someone on the left leg who's almost a 3, but on the right leg they're just about a 2. That's a lot of grey area, but they have proportional asymmetry, so their overall score is 2-2, and this means that the person is good to go. The shoulder mobility screen is another example. As you can see here, an 8-inch hand, the right side scored 8.5 inches, the left hand scored 11. That is a 2.5 inch difference between both sides, but again it's proportional asymmetry. Another example then is the active straight leg raise. One leg could go to 75 degrees, the other leg to 70, but again it's proportional asymmetry. Now examples of gross asymmetry will be, again let's go with the hurdle step, the shoulder mobility and active straight leg raise. So on the hurdle step they're 3 on one leg and right on the other, they're 3 on the left leg and 1 on the right leg. Overall score a 3-1. Shoulder mobility, the right scores 8.5 inches, the left scores 14 inches. That's gross asymmetry. Active straight leg raise, one leg goes to 75 degrees, the other goes only to 40 degrees. That's gross asymmetry. So again, the functional movement screen does not say that we need to be symmetrical. It just doesn't want us to have gross asymmetry. It allows for proportional asymmetry. And another argument that is made is that it does not correlate to sports performance. And this is also 100% correct. It's not meant to. The functional movement screen is just a tool to measure movement quality. No more, no less. All the functional movement screen wants to know is, do you have the movement competency to withstand your general physical preparation and specific physical preparation? So here is a pyramid that depicts this. So at the foundation we have movement quality, and as we work our way up to the apex of the pyramid we see GPP and then SPP at the top. So the functional movement screen philosophy is basically these two things: movement quality before movement quantity. Don't put strength and conditioning on top of this functional movement. So the 7 tests that make up the functional movement screen are the big 3: the overhead deep squat, the hurdle step, the inline lunge, and then the little 4: shoulder mobility, active straight leg raise, trunk stability push-up, and rotary stability. Now what these 7 screens can tell us is the following: fundamental mobility, active straight leg raise. This will tell us whether someone should be deadlifting, squatting, or doing heavy closed chain loaded activities like running and plyometrics. Shoulder mobility will tell us if someone should be doing heavy upper body pushing and pulling, and that goes for horizontal as well as vertical, so also overhead and pushing and pulling. Sub-maximum stabilization, so with rotary stability, this will show should the person be doing conventional core training that will cause high threshold strategy. High threshold stabilization, so the push-up will show us if someone should be doing heavy upper and lower body loads and vigorous plyometric activity. And finally, functional movement patterns, the big three: inline lunge, exercises and loads involving a lunge or split squat pattern, hurdle step, exercise and loads involving a single leg stance, and finally the squat, exercise and loads involving any part of the squatting pattern. The scoring criteria of the functional movement screen: 0 means pain, and if someone is in pain, you're going to have to refer them out to a therapist or someone who knows how to deal with pain. 1 means they have dysfunctional movement. 2 means they have adequate movement quality, can perform the movement with some compensation, and this is good to go. And 3 is perfect. The minimum standard of movement quality with regards to the functional movement screen is a 14 out of 21 with no 1s or asymmetries, so at least symmetrical 2s on everything. Now this doesn't mean that a specific individual will not get injured. This just shows that a specific individual has the minimum standard of movement quality that should allow them to withstand the stressors of a strength and conditioning program or any physical activity that they engage in. So the functional movement screen objectives. All the functional movement screen is looking for is pain, dysfunctional movement and gross asymmetries. It wants to see if you have the minimum standard of movement competency, and also wants to rate and rank the risk of injury. The functional movement screen is not looking for perfection, okay? Symmetrical 2s are good to go, but again, as I said in the previous slide, this does not guarantee that someone will not get injured. And even if a specific individual scored a 21 out of 21 on the functional movement screen, this does not guarantee that this individual will not get injured. Again, the functional movement screen is just showing if a specific individual has enough movement quality to buffer the stress of a strength and conditioning program or any physical activity. So the functional movement screen respects a few different areas. It respects neurodevelopmental kinesiology, and if anyone here has done dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, I've done the A and B course, you can see the FMS all over that. Pain and motor control, we know that pain changes motor control, and the FMS respects this as well. It also respects regional interdependence, and what regional interdependence means is that if one area of the body is dysfunctional, it may show up as a symptom in another part of the body. And this is not just isolated to one system. So for instance, if I have some sort of dysfunction in my hips that's leading to low back pain, that is one example of regional interdependence within one system. But regional interdependence also shows how one system can affect another system. So for instance, if I have a digestive issue, that may be showing up as low back pain. Or if I have something wrong with an internal organ like my kidneys, that also may be showing up as low back pain. And this is a visceral somatic reflex, so again, when an organ is showing up as a musculoskeletal issue. It also respects a high threshold strategy, which I'll be going over in just a moment. So functional movement screen findings. A great thing with the functional movement screen is that it will tell you if someone has a primary mobility or stability or motor control issue, or maybe even both. So this is where a high threshold strategy comes in. High threshold strategy: mobility and stability, prime movers versus stabilizers. Prime movers are big, superficial, multi-joint muscles like our pec, our quad and our hamstring, for example. Stabilizers are generally deep single joint muscles like our rotator cuff, multifidus, transverse abdominis, glute medius and minimus. In a high threshold strategy, prime movers are now acting as primary stabilizers, and this gives an illusion of poor flexibility. This is a high threshold strategy. This is caused by a dysfunctional feed-forward mechanism, which I'll discuss in the next slide. Feed-forward mechanism is authentic stability. This is when stabilizers fire at a subconscious level milliseconds before a prime mover initiates movement or force production. An example of this is when I bring my right arm up over my head. Milliseconds before I initiated this motion, the stabilizers in along my spine fired to give me proximal stability, and my rotator cuff also fired to centrate the head of the humerus in the glenoid fossa. And this is what a feed-forward mechanism is. What can cause a dysfunctional feed-forward mechanism is poor joint centration from injury, poor postural habits and poor training habits. So an example of a high threshold strategy is have someone lie supine. Get them to raise their hip into flexion, so just like the actor straight leg raise test position. Let's say this person can only bring their leg to 50-55 degrees of hip flexion, but passively you can move their leg to 70 to 80 degrees of hip flexion. So basically this person doesn't have enough proximal stability, authentic stability or functional feed-forward stability to stabilize the spine to allow the hip to express a full range of motion. Again, proximal stability will equal distal mobility. So if I have more authentic stability at my spine, I'll be able to display more mobility at my hip in this example. Remember, mobility issues are consistent findings. Stability motor control issues are inconsistent findings. So the toe touch is an example to prove this. Let's say you have someone stand up with their feet together and get them to bend forward and try and touch their toes. And let's say they can't touch their toes. So they're unable to touch their toes. Now get the person to sit down on the ground and now ask them to touch their toes. Now if the person can touch their toes in a seated position when they couldn't in a standing position, this is a stability or motor control issue because it is an inconsistent finding. The person couldn't touch their toes when they were standing on their feet, but when they went to a seated position they could touch their toes. Now let's say the person still couldn't touch their toes when they were seated, so now they couldn't touch their toes standing or seated. This is a consistent finding, so this would indicate more of a mobility issue. Finally, here are just some of the scoring criteria for the functional movement screen, and I'll also put a link at the end of this presentation that you can download a scoring form from functionalmovement.com. So with the overhead squat with a 3, we're looking for femur below parallel, stick in line with the foot, torso and tibia in line, and no knee valgus. It's all the same criteria for a 2 except the heels will be elevated. The only thing that might be a little bit different would be the torso and tibia alignment when the heels are elevated. They mightn't be perfectly in a line. 1 means the person cannot meet this criteria with the heels elevated, and 0 of course is pain. With the hurdle step at 3, we're looking for the stick to be parallel to the floor, no lumbar flexion, foot dorsiflex, foot, knee, hip, all in one alignment, and no body weight put into the heel touch when they step over the hurdle. A 2 then is when there's a slight bit of compensation with all this criteria. So the stick doesn't stay parallel to the floor, there's some lumbar flexion, the foot doesn't stay dorsiflexed, the foot, knee and hip may display some external and internal rotation, but the person can maintain balance and lightly touch the heel on the other side of the kit and bring it back. A 1 means the person cannot maintain balance or they knock the test kit over 3 times. And again, with all the screens in the FMS, you give the person 3 attempts. Now with the hurdle step, you're scoring the leg that stepped over, but this is only just for convenience. Remember, with all the screens, you're looking at a pattern. So with regards to the hurdle step, you're looking at a single leg stance pattern. For the inline lunge, a 3 is feet straight ahead, front heel remains down, back hip stays in extension, spine stays vertical, stick maintains contacts of the sacrum, T-spine and head, back knee stays in line with the front heel, back foot stays straight, and the back heel can touch the board. For a 2, feet don't stay straight ahead, front heel doesn't stay down, back hip doesn't stay in extension, spine doesn't stay vertical, stick loses contacts, back knee doesn't stay in line with the front heel, back foot doesn't stay straight, but the back heel can touch the board. And 1 means the person loses balance on all 3 attempts, and they also are unable to put the back heel down on the board when they stand back up on each attempt. Note again, you're scoring the front leg for convenience, but again you're looking at a whole pattern. Shoulder mobility. A 3 is hand comes within 1 hand length of each other. A 2, hands come in 1.5 hand length of each other. And a 1 means the hands cannot come in 1.5 length of each other. Again, note you're scoring the top arm, mark the closest points to the hands, but once again you're looking at a whole pattern here. You're looking at thoracic mobility and reciprocal scapular action. Make sure you also do the clearance test for pain. So there's a clearance test for shoulder impingement and any AC joint impingement. And also look out for hypermobility with this test. You'll get a lot of females or young males who can actually touch their hands together, and that's too much mobility. So those people would actually need to probably do some shoulder stability corrections. But that's just something to be aware of, because technically they are a 3 by the FMS criteria, but they actually have too much mobility. And remember, too much mobility is just as dysfunctional as too little mobility. Just to give you an example of the scoring criteria here on the shoulder mobility. So let's say someone has an 8-inch hand. If the hands come within 8 inches, that's a 3. If they come within 12 inches, that's 2, and if they come outside of 12 inches, that would be a 1. Actual straight leg raise, so a 3, the stick is at the midpoint of the femur, so it's between the ASIS and the knee joint line. The ankle passes the stick, and the down leg stays in extension and stays neutral, so there's no external rotation on the down leg, and it also stays in contact with the board. So the back of the knee of the down leg stays in contact with the board. A 2 is all the same criteria, but now the stick is at the knee joint line instead of the midpoint position of the femur. Again, the ankle passes the stick, the down leg stays in extension, stays neutral with no external rotation, and the back of the knee stays in contact with the board. A 1 means the person cannot meet this criteria. Note, you're scoring the raising leg, but once again you're looking at a whole pattern. You're looking at a hip separation pattern, not just hamstring flexibility. You're looking to see, can one leg stay in extension while the other goes into flexion. Trunk stability push-up. This is the only test on the functional movement screen that has different criteria for males and females. So for a 3 for males, the thumbs are at eyebrow level. For a female, for a 3, the thumbs are at chin level. And the criteria is the body must come up as one unit, so there's no lag time between the upper body and the core, or the midsection, upon rising. A 2 is all the same criteria, the only difference is now that the thumbs for the males is at the chin level, and for the females is at shoulder level. Also make sure that the feet are together. For a 1, it just means the person cannot meet this criteria. Note there's also a clearance test with the trunk stability push-up, and this is the prone extension test, just looking to see if anyone has any impingement pain in the low back. Finally, we're going to look at rotary stability, and rotary stability correlates to reflexive turning. So for anyone who's done dynamic new muscle stabilization, you know what reflexive turning is. It correlates to when the baby at age 5 months to 6 months starts to be able to roll from supine to prone. A 3 in the rotary stability is hands, knees and feet, and the feet are dorsiflex, are all in contact with the board. Spine stays parallel to the floor or board. Same side knee and elbow track over the board, and the elbow contacts the knee. A 2 then is when the hands, knees and feet, and once again the feet are dorsiflexed, are all in contact with the board. Spine stays parallel to the floor, and the opposite side elbow and knee contact over the center of the board, and it's very important that they contact over the center of the board. 1 is a loss of balance, or the opposite elbow and knee do not meet in the center of the board. Note once again there's a clearance test for the rotary stability, just like the trunk stability push-up screen and the shoulder mobility screen, and the clearance test for rotary stability is the spinal flexion test. Again, looking for any pain anywhere in the body. On rotary stability you're scoring the upper arm, but once again, like I said, you're scoring a whole pattern. And finally, here are some resources. Gray's latest book, Movement. Gray's first book, Athletic Body and Balance. Level 1 and 2 Functional and Movement Screen Workshops. The DVD set, Advanced Functional and Movement Screening. The Secret Series DVD set. A link to the scoring criteria of the Functional Movement Screen from graycookmovement.com. Charlie Weingross's DVD, Training Equals Rehab and Rehab Equals Training. And any dynamic neuromuscular stabilization courses.
That's it for today's episode, guys. If you have any questions, leave them on the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel, or you can email me at atswtv@gmail.com. I'll talk to you soon, guys. Take care, be well, peace.